From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. Our topic today is very, very timely. We think it's of interest to people across the country, especially in waterfront communities. The title is Saving Our Maritime Industrial Businesses, One Waterfront at a Time. And our spokesperson is Craig Merrilees. He's a board member of the Sausalito Working Waterfront Coalition, and he and his colleagues recognize that across America, working waterfronts are disappearing at an alarming rate. The threat is real and can be seen in Alameda, California, where a healthy maritime and industrial ecosystem of businesses was literally scraped off the waterfront by developers, replacing them with condos and apartments. Across the bay in Sausalito, a team of maritime and industrial business owners have joined forces with artists, entrepreneurs, and other concerned citizens to improve the working waterfront that serves thousands of boat owners, provides hundreds of jobs, trains young people with hands-on apprenticeships, and generates valuable tax revenue. I want to hear from this coalition about how Sausalito's Working Waterfront is breaking new ground on helping their community build a new generation of maritime and industrial success. I was a friend of Ben Svensson, whose Svensson Boatyard graced the waterfront over in Alameda for years. I'm good friends with his surviving son, Sean Svensson, and I really witnessed how what had been a boatyard next to a small harbor of berths was wiped out. And in the process, not only was the boatyard no longer available to local mariners, but the chandlery that they had was no longer available. The sailmakers that were in the ecosystem within walking distance of the shop and the harbor, they were gone. The welders, the metal workers, the electricians, the whole ecosystem of craftspeople around a maritime environment, they were all gone. So those jobs were immediately lost, and the character of Alameda was damaged in the process. I want to hear about what you guys are doing to prevent such a similar kind of local tragedy in Sausalito. Craig and John, welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
We want to thank you and the members of the club for hosting this discussion. I think what we're going to see is some of the impacts that we've already experienced and the consequences of doing nothing and standing by while working waterfronts disappear here in Sausalito, as we saw in Alameda and around the country. In Sausalito, we're working together with the coalition that you described through our Sausalito Working Waterfront Coalition to try and find a different alternative, and one that recognizes the incredible economic benefits that working waterfronts create and the potential they present in the future to do even more. With me today will be my colleague, John DeRay, one of the founders of the Sausalito Working Waterfront Coalition, and John will be joining us on audio. I think we'd like to begin today with a 6-minute excerpt from our 1-hour documentary film that's too long for today's presentation, but available by going to our website at sausalitoworkingwaterfront.com. But I think it's a great introduction to what's happening in Sausalito and the working waterfront there.
If you live on Sausalito's beautiful hillside, you may have a view of the Marin ship, but you may not know about the ecosystem of innovation and creativity that goes on in that beautiful working waterfront. There is a rich maritime history in Sausalito. Many famous boats were built in now extinct boatyards. And as gentrification threatens those that remain, we watch and wait. Of course, the most famous boatyard of all is called Marin Ship, the most intact of the remaining World War II shipyards. Since then, Marin Ship has become more than a shipyard. It is a living, thriving ecosystem of innovation. Its survival hangs in a delicate balance.
The character of this area is something that you really cannot find anywhere else that I can think of.
I'm pretty interested in helping the next generation get into more of a hands-on world.
This community has formed itself and reformed itself for 50, 60 years. That's what makes it authentic. It's not something that a group of people can sit down and recreate this.
He's filling top. So first you weave it in the way he's doing it so it stays in, then we paint it, and then putty goes on the outside.
It really seems like the waterfront acts in a lot of ways as one team. There are things that we can do that are maybe harder to do at other shops, and there are things that other shops can do that we're not able to do. The vast majority of the waterfront businesses here are recognizing that an individual business or organization like ours' success is a function of our neighbors' success as well.
After Hurricane Katrina, we designed a system for search and rescue to find people and cars and things that had gone into the ocean. So we did a lot of work with law enforcement and the FBI for doing search and rescue stuff.
So what's novel about our small business is that we are doing invention, and prototyping, and ultimately manufacturing all in our small facility.
This is a community that's unique in that it has a large number of small, very talented companies engaged in manufacturing, robotics, the marine industry, all of the industries that we participate in as well. And it dramatically accelerates our ability to bring new products to market and do that in an innovative way.
I'm regulated on a federal level, and every 2 years the boat is hauled out in dry dock. You know, it's not like you just hire someone off the street who understands that stuff. The commercial boats require that experienced body of craftsmen to maintain what they do. And of course, in a trickle-down sense, you know, even the casual yachtsman benefits from people who have that depth of experience and training.
The Marin Ship is really a very special place. It's a very rare, golden age of technology here.
I'm familiar with these flatland industrial sites. The moment you change that for people who are not using it for industrial purposes is basically a time that you drive the industry completely out of the area. If you move these spaces too far away, you kill what is a real soup to nuts design strategy that worked for the military, and now it's going to work for the next stage of the green revolution right here in Marin Ship.
It's such a valuable resource to have artists like me in here that are able to make some noise and dust and use water and work outdoors, because that doesn't happen around the Bay Area often.
You never underestimate the power of place to inspire the work. And that energy, it's still here. Everyone around here is working. It's World War II shipyard. Bam, bam, bam. They're always working here.
During COVID, we partnered with the Marin Ship group that was doing the mask making so they could ship those masks out across the country.
You know, Sausalito is a great little town, a lot of history. It's not Newport Beachified, which some people would like to do to it. It's just a bunch of real good people here.
I was just over in Alameda. They scraped about 2 miles of the waterfront clean of all these craftsmen, tradesmen, mechanics, all types of trades, for the 3,000 boats that are in Alameda. That represents a real shock to those boat owners.
Being a design house and a manufacturing facility, we can really quickly respond and adapt to needs, and it doesn't take much of a stretch of imagination to realize how quickly you can produce really high quality things if you're surrounded with a community of talented people, and we're really hoping to preserve that and actually kind of make that grow a little bit. When you push out all the shops, when you push out the industry, that is going to change Sausalito forever.
So I really feel like we've spoken out at every opportunity to enrich people's understanding of just how much of the economy takes place out here. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a real industry.
Well, Well, what we've got is a quick run through of our experience in Sausalito, what we've learned and what we'd like to share with everyone about working waterfronts, why they're important and why they're worth fighting for. The working waterfront in Sausalito is known as the Marineship District, and this was created during World War II. It brings together an incredible ecosystem, the term you used yourself, Ron, to describe the industrial, the art, the maritime, that all comes together in a very important ecosystem. This shipyard in Sausalito, like many around the Bay Area, a half dozen of them, were created during World War II. In Sausalito, the shipyard had to be created from scratch by filling in wetlands with soils that are subject to liquefaction during earthquakes and are also subject to subsidence over time. So that's part of our ecosystem. Many important things have happened in the Marineship over the years. During World War II, there was an important civil rights struggle in which Joseph James, a leader of the African American workers that made important contributions during the World War II shipyard effort, organized to fight back against racial discrimination and worked with Thurgood Marshall, who went on to serve in the U.S. Supreme Court to fight discrimination in shipyards, and that fight took place in Sausalito's Marineship. This shipyard, like other Navy shipyards, has well-documented toxic contamination and other problems that make it a poor choice for residential development, while the legacy use for industrial and maritime use is ideal. Now, we're mentioning the problems with housing because there's a lot of pressure to convert this working waterfront into waterfront condos. This is a list of the problems that make that a poor choice. The extensive contamination that we mentioned, the vulnerability to sea level rise, subsidence and liquefaction, the absolutely staggering cost of infrastructure and engineering that would be necessary to have any kind of development other than industrial and maritime. But here's one thing that's really serious, and that is that when elected officials make poor choices and set up conflicts between residential use and industrial use, the conflicts are enormous and they always go badly for the industrial working waterfront. That happens because lawsuits inevitably get filed against cities by angry residents for toxic contamination, for noise, for dust, for the operations, the incompatibility that they've been unfairly placed in adjacent to industrial working waterfronts. And history tells us that these conflicts always result in one thing, and that is the industry and the working waterfront being pushed out of existence. We believe firmly and are committed to the principle of housing in the Marineship, and will continue to support housing in areas, but only in areas that are located safely away from the working waterfront and industrial zone where residential development is inappropriate. So what we're focusing on now is making it possible for a new generation of maritime, industrial, and arts innovators to build on the culture and traditions, but add the modern innovations that are already taking place that we want to curate and encourage in the working waterfront. At the top of the list is the good paying jobs that are available to young people coming into the workplace, but they need skills. These jobs are important and they pay far more than many service jobs. The other aspect of the working waterfront is that there are absolutely essential services that have to be provided. Services that fire boats for the city of San Francisco, Northern California's fishing fleet, the ferry boats, all depend on Sausalito's working waterfront for their services. It also includes the kind of vessels that we're more familiar with. The large and small vessels all depend on Sausalito and other working waterfronts for the work that they need, sometimes annually. Now, here's something that not everybody appreciates, but there's hands-on experiential education taking place almost every day in the working waterfront. Children are constantly coming down to the waterfront, exposed to and involved with learning outside their classrooms taking place on vessels and on the working waterfront. We mentioned earlier those good jobs, how important they are. One thing that's an essential part of that is the paid apprenticeship programs already in existence in the working waterfront. And those are training maritime technicians who have a wide variety of skills: electronics, diesel mechanics, fundamentals of shipbuilding and repair, all taught to these graduates who are snapped up immediately as soon as they finish their apprenticeship program. And we'd like to see those apprenticeship programs expand because they make opportunities available, especially to people that have been denied those kinds of chances in the past. Sausalito's famous for the floating home communities. I happen to live on one of those floating homes and recently built one. Floating homes are adaptive to sea level rise, and we have hundreds here in Sausalito. The other thing we have is older fiberglass vessels that can be repurposed and used for affordable housing. We have existing marinas and berths available, and we'd like to see those expanded so that affordable housing on the water, it becomes an important element of the way Sausalito and other communities can deal with affordable housing. Artists are a part of the ecosystem that you mentioned earlier, Ron, and they're a vital part of Sausalito, both in terms of the economics, the fact that people come here to mingle, meet, and look and purchase art, but also a place where artists can have affordable workspaces. And those workspaces will disappear if the industrial working waterfront disappears. They're part of that ecosystem, and they depend on the affordable rents that the industrial zone provides for them. If we do nothing, we can see what will happen. You mentioned earlier about Svensson's Boatyard. This is before and after when that area was scraped in Alameda, and it'll be gone forever, and that ecosystem is wiped out, and it will not be replaced. It can't be rebuilt once it's destroyed. So it's happening from San Diego all the way up to Seattle, and it's happening around the country, in the Gulf Coast to Stonington, Maine. People are standing up to fight for their working waterfronts. These are some of the forces that are at work to attack our working waterfront, but it's similar elsewhere. And it usually begins with developers who want to build luxury, lucrative waterfront homes. Or sometimes it's speculators who bought land cheap that was industrial zoned and then want it rezoned into residential. Sometimes corporate boosters, whether they're on city councils or other organizations, are pushing tourism, retail, restaurant, event spaces kinds of developments. Sometimes they'll employ consultants who suggest that the industrial zone can be converted into chic industrial style eateries and retail, leaving no industrial behind and only a semblance of what was. And most of these promoters think they're somehow immune from the effects of sea level rise and toxic contamination. Those problems are smoothed over, conveniently avoided. Claims are made that everything's taken care of, and the famous "don't worry, it's going to be fine." In our community, there's been a rush to fill housing quotas and placate developers. Some of those city council members support waterfront housing that's immediately adjacent to the boatyard, which is the most fatal kind of decision that can be made for a working waterfront. We think the better alternative is to expand, improve, and modernize the industrial maritime services. In our community, we have sonar equipment developers who are doing research and development of new systems. We have people who are building autonomous remote undersea and drone systems. We have modular microgrid systems, robotics of all kinds. We have people that are working on sea level rise adaptation strategies that include oyster reefs. We have people that have developed electronic cooling systems to radically reduce the cost and increase the efficiency of server farms. And finally, we're doing a lot of work with hybrid, and we're looking into electric marine propulsion systems, both in the development phase and, for those that are ready to go, retrofitting installations. You can see here that the blue and green economy, taking advantage of the demand and the need to make improvements in the way we use power, both for recreation and for industry. And Some of this work is being done in the marine ship now. We'd like to see more, whether it's electric boats, charging stations for the electric boats, retrofitting some of the ferries that has already taken place in Sausalito to make new hybrid systems. So economic development and resiliency is a key principle that we're pursuing, and as are others, in this effort to modernize the marine ship. And it all comes down to that ecosystem of technology, education, fabrication, the maritime, and art all working together in an ecosystem. We call this the Blue Wave Innovation Zone, bringing together the new and the old together and modernizing it. This is an aerial view of the extensive 20-acre plus marine ship innovation zone that combines the working waterfront, the conventional maritime, with areas for new innovation technologies that we're encouraging. This is one concept of a facility that we can imagine being built to provide incubator and accelerator facilities for these new blue economy entrepreneurs that are interested in working in the marine ship. This is a really important move for Sausalito because it's based on sustainable use of ocean resources. It's an important market. It's expected to double to $3 trillion by the year 2030. We also need to face up to the dramatic shortage of skilled trades workers that we have and that are in demand and can provide excellent family wage jobs. We know that we're interested in looking into new sources of energy, including wind, wave, and tidal systems. And we have to do something to get a much better handle and new technologies to deal with sea level rise and ocean health technology. And Sausalito wants to be open to all of the above. So in order to succeed, we've identified the following steps. And it begins with educating and mobilizing Bay Area citizens, including boat owners and yacht club members, to be part of the solution. It includes reaching out to candidates and elected officials and helping them understand why it's worth protecting and improving our working waterfronts. We also want to call out people who, in those positions of responsibility, elected officials, for example, who say that they love the working waterfront, but then vote to kill it. So we want to educate our local representatives about the importance of working waterfronts. Our 1-hour documentary film that we've shown dozens of times, and we saw an excerpt of that today, is one part of that education process. And we encourage folks to join the Working Waterfront Coalition and subscribe to our newsletter at that address, sausalitoworkingwaterfront.org. Now, the last and final point really is that this is not about nostalgia. This is about the future, and this is about the economic engine that has helped Sausalito survive through very difficult times. We note that in normal years, the marine ship generates important tax revenue. In fact, it's the largest source of tax revenue in the city. And that was especially true during the pandemic when retail and tourism collapsed. It was the working waterfront that provided valuable, essential revenues to the city. So this industrial working waterfront serves as a way to diversify and strengthen the economy that Sausalito has right now. So working together, the marine services, the allied small industries are all there, as you say, part of the ecosystem that makes for a healthy community. You can see the pie charts here that show just how important those revenues are. That brings us full circle and back to the beginning. Ron, I want to say what a pleasure it's been and an honor to be able to make this kind of presentation, have this discussion. And we look forward to talking more with you and the members of the club about what we've learned and what we can do together to save our working waterfronts.
See, a couple of comments. First of all, most people don't realize that during World War II, at the beginning, right away, largely due to the brilliance of Henry Kaiser, who famously met with FDR just before World War II, and he said, if there's going to be a war, you're going to need ships. And in order to get ships, you're going to need shipyards. And Roosevelt supposedly said, well, Henry, have you ever built a ship? And he said, no, That's why I'm talking about shipyards, because in order to build ships, you've got a great shipyards, and I can build them rapidly. It is actually a fact that the San Francisco Bay Area, including Sausalito, Richmond, Alameda, San Francisco, Vallejo, rapidly became big shipyard facilities. And in fact, at their peak, were the largest shipbuilding center on the planet, literally bigger than Norfolk Naval Shipyard back in Virginia, which was #2. That was a very big, rapid expansion in our area. The remnants of that have disappeared in most parts of the Bay Area, but as you mentioned, it became the sort of like soil upon which the maritime businesses in northern and the Marineship is built. It seems to me that we're all familiar with the value of rainforests as habitat, and people know that we got to make sure we preserve the Amazon, because if we tear it down, it will then kill birds and animals and we'll destroy the ecosystem. Everybody knows that you have to keep a habitat in order to maintain ecosystem. The way I see it, the Marineship is a bit of a habitat for a business ecosystem. The entire industrial waterfront down there is a habitat for all these marine businesses and new entrepreneurial versions of these marine businesses, which need each other to survive and be healthy. You can't separate the welders from the electricians and the boat yards from the boats and try to keep one of those elements there. What would happen with the big marinas in Sausalito, which are a major part of its tourist attraction, if you didn't have boat yards nearby where you could put the boats? And what would happen if effectively you just had the whole edge of Sausalito ringed with apartment buildings? I'm not sure its charm would still be there. Tell us, when you try to make your case to the city council members, what's your strongest argument? You showed us that there's an economic argument. Sounds like you're worried about special interests who have more say on this issue than you guys.
Local decision making is ultimately a democratic process. And as people are educated in the community and those ideas filter to elected officials, we found elected officials are generally willing to take a look at this and understand. That's not to say there aren't powerful interests and forces pushing in other direction. We feel that elected officials have been increasingly responsive to the concerns, particularly the economic impact and the necessity to protect the ecosystem and avoid the conflicts that can sometimes happen if poor decisions are made that, for example, place residential housing immediately adjacent to the working waterfront. That's a recipe for disaster. And the loser, as my colleague John DeRay always points out appropriately, industry and the working waterfront always lose. If it's going to be wealthy condo owners going to fight a shipyard that makes noise, dust, and the kinds of things that happen in a shipyard or an industrial, small industry setting, the loser is always the latter, and they'll be pushed out. So just educating folks about the importance of good zoning, sensible housing solutions, and maintaining the working waterfront is something now that more and more elected officials understand. And we intend to continue that education process.
Who are the decision makers that must be persuaded in order for you to win your argument?
Starting at the grassroots level, it has to be a citizen education effort. And then those elected officials hopefully will respond to those concerns. Now, there's also pressure from developers, property owners, speculators, developers. They're all part of the process too. Without the citizens being educated, elected officials tend to go the other way, bend to the special interests. But when there's good education and involvement of large numbers of citizens, then there's a more balanced approach, which is the effort that is underway in Sausalito.
So many people are familiar with the Industrial Center building, used to be called the Industrial Arts Building in Sausalito. It's a big World War II giant couple-story building in the Marineship area. Can you describe the chain of events if that got eliminated? How many businesses or shopkeepers are inside that building? And if that got turned into an apartment building, where would they go?
Well, that building right now is and has been for some time a haven for artists. And that's really what it's supposed to be, what it's designed for at this point. is to be repurposed to provide space for artists, and hundreds of them make their home here. And the fact that hundreds of artists are housed there and producing works of art that are appreciated all over the region and the country is an important resource. It's an important cultural asset, but it also has economic value. That kind of artistic space, which is found throughout the working waterfront, throughout the Marine Ship District, is something that is important to defend, just as the industrial and the maritime businesses are.
So supposing I was an owner of a piece of property in the working waterfront, I came to you and I said, look, I love artists, I love the beautiful ecosystem, I like your argument. However, I can get 3 times the cost per square foot if I put a condo on this same piece of land. I did it with my farmlands out in Fresno. I did it up in Stockton. Now I want to do it right here. Persuade me that I shouldn't take the money.
Well, fortunately, there's better ways to deal with this than kind of a gladiator style conflict. And that system that we've had over the past century is called zoning. And zoning tries to engage in a process of sensible planning so that we don't put industrial and working waterfront maritime industries butted up against residential communities where there will be inevitable disastrous consequences. So through smart planning, good zoning enforcement, those kinds of conflicts can be avoided. There's plenty of money to be made in land development and property speculation, but it can't happen everywhere without rules and without guardrails. So as long as the rules are in place and the guardrails are in place, people that buy industrial property can continue operating that as industrial property. If they want to change the use and try and build housing there, that can lead to problems. So they can and should expect pushback and can expect that they can't always have what they want, but they can continue to follow the rules and the guardrails that have been put in place to protect the public interest.
Marin County has a long history of thoughtful land use. People probably don't remember that GGNRA started in Marin County when his supervisor, Warnham, wanted to stop the development of the Marin headlands and basically did, in fact, do just exactly that. One of the reasons that Sausalito and Mill Valley don't look like Daly City is because the citizens of Marin County decided they did not want to have houses chock-a-block right next to each other. And they wanted that green space, which makes property values here worth so much more. Talk to me about ways that you can connect to that heritage of thoughtful land use, which has turned out to be economically valuable and profitable for people who do own property in Marin County. And there is the fact that it didn't get industrialized, like Fremont.
That's right. No, that's right. I think there are so many good examples of citizens taking action, volunteers coming together to speak up for the public interest, whether it's open space or recreation or other kinds of intangibles that add special uniqueness to a community. And, in our community, we all realize that we need more affordable housing, which is another important project. Those needs need to be balanced, and the Working Waterfront Coalition supports affordable housing and will continue to advocate for sensible housing in parts of the Marin Ship that are not adjacent to the working waterfront, that are safely away from the industrial and maritime district, still in the historic district where housing is compatible and makes sense.
So give me some milestones for the path you hope to be on to succeed in preserving the waterfront. Give me 2 or 3 steps along the way and give me a picture of your success and what timeline can you visualize?
Well, I can imagine the steps that are already underway are, I think, charting us on a solid course. The kind of educational and outreach work that's been done, the fact that the 1-hour documentary film has been shown 30 times in our local community and reached thousands of viewers has been an important step. And that kind of outreach and citizen education is critical. The fact that we have elected officials who understand the problems at all levels of government has been another important part of the puzzle. I think the outreach to business owners to help them get support, the elected officials and the community, so that they can continue making their contributions as busy as they are is another. And new investment and working with developers who want to support the blue economy and support light industry and bring jobs back to the United States that were thought to be sent overseas. These are the kinds of steps we're taking now to meet with people who support that kind of green investment and the blue economy to try and make both our oceans, our seaside communities, and the planet a healthier and safer place.
I see a parallel also in San Francisco. You may recall that there used to be a freeway along the Embarcadero. A friend of mine, Alvin Duskin, was part of stopping the freeway in its tracks before it continued northward around the circumference of the waterfront of San Francisco. And after the Loma Prieta earthquake in '89, Willie Brown was part of an effort and helped to succeed in tearing down that freeway. It seemed like an anti-industrial thing to do at the time, but in fact, it increased the home values and the property values and the real estate values of the entire downtown San Francisco to get rid of that ugly freeway that was there. In a way, I'm hearing you make the case that you can preserve the value of all of Sausalito by maintaining part of its character, the working waterfront called the Maritime.
Sometimes these moves strike people at first as counterintuitive, and the freeway is one example. The idea that we already recognize and have and want to maintain something that some people regard as antiquated, the notion of light industrial businesses, which are absolutely essential and exist in our ecosystem in Sausalito. We want to support and encourage those. And I think, that may strike some as antiquated, but when you look at it, it turns out to be an incredible source of economic resilience in the community. So I think you're right to question some of the conventional thinking and make sure that we're not destroying some of the precious, impossible to recreate aspects of this community and other communities.
Yeah, those who check out the history may remember that Ann Meyer wanted to preserve the archives in Fort Miley, and she began what would ultimately be the GGNRA. She got support from Phil Burton, and essentially that entire southern Marin sort of landscape, which is so beautiful and which has contributed to the land values in Marin County holding up as well as they have, turned out to be economically very, very smart and literally worth billions and billions of dollars. At first it seemed like, gee, why are these environmentalists and ecologists getting their way, creating this GGRNA, but it turned out to be very valuable. I see your case similar to theirs. You're basically arguing for something that will be good for the broader community, and you've had to argue the economic case for it by imagining what could happen if you lost the Merrilees waterfront. How can people who want to help you support your efforts?
I think the best thing to do, Ron, is to have folks log on to our website and sign up for our newsletter. We don't besiege people with information, but we do keep people informed. So you can follow the developments, you can follow the updates on our progress at sausalitoworkingwaterfront.org. Sign up for the electronic newsletter, and that way we can keep in touch.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us. We wish you success in your uphill battle against the sort of rezonification of the charm in Sausalito. Thanks so much for being our guest on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you, Ron. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.